I use the term retired in this context very loosely. I was never paid for my work, and there was no pension to speak of. Cryptozoology has always been a passion of mine, one that in my old age I no longer have the energy to pursue. But I didn't leave empty-handed. The treasures of the trade are not monetary ones. They are stories, some passed around from one hunter to the next, others gained from experience on the front lines. The one that I keep coming back to, even now, is a personal one. It's been many years, but I think I finally have the nerve to share it. Before we get started, a little background. I'm a journalist by trade, and in the mid-80s, there was a spike in submissions to the paper I worked for, which shall remain anonymous, pertaining to unexplained phenomenon. Sightings of remarkable but horrific beasts in the local forest. They were a trip to read, but not worth investigating, according to my boss. Our mantra was clear: straight to the news. The paper was known for neutral, unbiased, fact-based articles. That meant no sensationalist headlines, no opinion pieces, and nothing that could be dismissed or disproved. Still, I had so much fun reading these bizarre tales, the highlight of any given workday when one landed on my desk. On one particularly slow day at the office, I was handed 3 separate letters. All were new submissions describing similar incidents, too similar to be written off with the others. According to these first-hand accounts, there was an ominous creature that stood at the edge of the forest when driven by. It was a humanoid entity covered in a grass-like fur all over. Other than the greenery, there were no identifiable features. It blended in with the tree line, but jarred the 3 drivers when it moved, running into the road at great speed. If this was a prank, it was an elaborate one, especially for the time period. Each letter had a different handwriting and tone. I later discovered that the return addresses were those of residents deemed as being reputable sources for the paper in the past. I was baffled. My boss was not so intrigued. Upon showing him the letters, he simply took the names of our source list and barked at me to stop playing make-believe and get back to work. He was anything if not endearing. I threw the mystery letters in a drawer with the rest. I worked there for 2 more years before calling it quits and beginning my new job as a full-time cryptozoologist, inspired by the paper's strange submissions. My retirement and many vested benefits from the company would fund this passion project of mine. You might find it odd given the line of work, but for the first time in my life, I felt truly fulfilled. There are no words to describe the feeling, but freedom is a good attempt. I won't bore you with the details of my adventures into the unknown. They are mostly uninteresting tales whose joyous highlights and precious moments could never be spoiled with enough embellishment to convey the meaning they hold to me. Just know that almost all of these endeavors were unfruitful. The journey was far more enjoyable than the destination, save for a handful of hunts that harbored actual danger. But there was never a closer call than with the Moss Man, as I later dubbed it. Going through some old notes from my days at the paper, I happened upon those 3 letters. Pondering over them for a bit, an idea sprung to mind and a smile crept across my face. I called a friend of mine to meet me. Then, in a flash, I grabbed my keys and drove to the forest edge, hoping to catch a glimpse of this mysterious Moss Man. Even if it didn't exist, it would be a fun outing doing what I loved. The friend I called was a rookie hunter. I was his teacher, in a sense, a title I wore proudly. This would be our 5th excursion together. When he arrived, we didn't waste any time mincing words. We simply ventured into the woods, flashlights in hand, ready to find the beast and document its existence. If only we knew at the time what we were getting ourselves into. We walked quietly for an hour before one of us spoke up. Spooked by the darkness, we were in need of some small talk to distract ourselves and break the awkward tension. "Say, Jack, why are you so keen on finding this grass man anyway? I thought your old paper was sent pranks like that all the times." I snickered. "It's Moss Man, Henry, and I never said that. That's just what my boss thought. I was never able to follow any leads." Henry looked off for a moment and then came back. "What if it was just a guy in a suit, scaring the locals?" Henry was a believer at heart, but he wore his skepticism on his sleeve. That's what I loved about him. It's his apprehension that kept my mind on straight on the explorations we embarked on previously. I had been known to let my enthusiasm get the better of me on more than one occasion. Well, that's what we're here to find out. If there's no evidence, that will probably be our conclusion. Footsteps echoed in the distance, branches breaking beneath a heavy weight. Henry and I slowed to a stop. "Did you hear that, Jack?" "Shh, quiet, don't make a sound." I listened, but was met with only silence. We brushed the incident off and kept walking, now rattled. "So," Henry asked, "how big is this thing supposed to be?" All of the letters described it as being the size of a man, no specifics past that. Henry turned around and stood still for a moment. I stayed with him, assuming he needs a second to gather his wits. "I think I left something in my car. I'll be right," I interjected before he could finish his statement. "Hot damn it, Henry. Do you want to be a hunter or not?" "Yes, I do. But nothing. How many times have you died on a hunt?" Henry paused. "Well, counting the kitsune incident, none." "Exactly. So pull your spine out of your ass and match my pace. Walk with confidence. You're going to be fine." Henry took a labored breath, turned back around, and straightened his posture. My pep talk seemed to have an effect. "Okay, Jack, I can do this." He gave me a determined look. We never explicitly discussed it before, but I sensed that Henry looked up to me, not unlike how a child looks up to their father. "Good, now follow me." I marched ahead and Henry followed. Then, there were more footsteps. We stopped again. The sun was so close, I was compelled to yell out, "Who's there? Show yourself!" The noises ceased. With a fair amount of trepidation myself, I pressed on, Henry now falling behind. "Pick up the pace, will you, Henry? This is what we're here for." A few moments passed, and the sound of footsteps recommenced. This time, the source was revealed. Out from behind a large tree stepped a gentleman in proper dress attire, adorning an overly wide smile. A shadowy form illuminated only by a silver of moonlight that broke through the forest canopy. Henry and I nearly jumped out of our skin and jolted back a bit. We then looked at each other, confused. I spoke first. "Hello there." The man did not respond. Henry chimed in. "What are you doing out here dressed like that?" No reply. I gave it another go. "Everything all right, sir? Would you like some help navigating the forest?" Not a single word offered in response. I contemplated our options and turned back to Henry, who was now visibly trembling. "Henry, we should go." We began walking in the opposite direction. To our utter disbelief, the man was there. impeding our travel. My blood ran cold. No footsteps this time, just inexplicable, instantaneous transit. Everywhere we turned, he was there. We had been ambushed. Without warning, the man transformed before our eyes. Green, grassy appendages seeped from his paws and enveloped his outline. His features vanished behind the foliage. It was him, the Moss Man. I never suspected it could shapeshift, but this was no time to jot down notes. It lunged at us. Henry and I dispersed, but with overwhelming agility and strength, it was able to grab us both and pin our bodies to a tree. We were pressed so forcefully against it, the bark felt like thousands of tiny needles scraping the skin of my back. Henry flayed about, screaming in fear and agony. I too was scared, but having been in similar positions before, I held my composure and hatched a plan. "Hey, big guy, I have a proposition for you." It tilted its head at me, a horrendous amalgamation of vines where its face should have been. "I'm sure you have to feed, and will probably taste better than the odd rabbit or fox passerby. Trust me, I understand. But if you kill us both, they'll come looking for us. You might be good against 1 or 2 men, but a whole search party, if your nest is discovered, you could be caught and killed yourself, or at the very least, forced to flee your home." It loosened its grip on me. "I used to work for the local paper. My testimonial holds weight in this town, to both local officials and the general public. I can make this appear to be an accident. Just leave the body when you're done. That's all I ask." Henry turned to me, more frightened than he had ever been of the Moss Man. "So, what do you say? Do we have a deal?" The creature nodded and let go. I ran out to the forest, my heart pounding. Unlike other cryptids I had dealt with, I didn't know this one's dialect, so I wasn't sure it would even understand me. I looked back only once to make sure the creature hadn't changed its mind and caught a glimpse of Henry being torn to shreds. Poor guy. I lost more rookies that way. The following day, Henry's body was found at the edge of the woods. After speaking with the mayor, a closet hunter and good friend of mine, and contacting the paper, my old boss commissioned a report from me. Henry had been attacked by a bear on an unfortunate stroll through the forest one evening. It was the talk of the community for a while, and as such, folks steered clear of the woods. The Moss Man's nest was safe, and so were the locals. A job well done in my book. So, let this serve as a lesson to you. When searching for monsters, always bring a friend along for the hunt. They might just save your life. Clowns weren't such a scary thing when I was a kid. Nowadays, there are movies like It and B-horror flicks that make them out to be something they're not. Really, there's nothing more wholesome than a clown. Their entire purpose in life is to make people laugh, the good ones anyways. I remember as a child seeing wholesome, happy clowns performing at birthday parties, for special occasions at school, at the circus, and at the fair. Even on TV, there was Bozo the Clown entertaining you after school each day. There were other ones I hadn't heard of as a kid who weren't so nice. The clowns like John Wayne Gacy, the infamous serial killer clown. And then there was my former friend, Mr. Giggles. See, when I was a kid, I told my parents I had an imaginary friend, but he wasn't imaginary. Even then, I was smart enough to know that. He wasn't human either. Still, he existed in a tangible way, but only in the darkness. He could manipulate the world around him, the bathroom to be more specific. He never seemed to come out of the bathroom. He would crouch in the bathroom and tell me to close the curtain and stuffed towels up in the cracks at the top so no light could get in. He hated the light, he said. My parents would ask what I was doing in the bathroom for so long, and I would just say I was going number 2, and it was taking longer than expected. But really, I was talking to Mr. Giggles. I didn't have any friends, so he kept me company when I was feeling lonely. Except he wasn't good company. He only said things that made me feel worse about myself and my situation. Still, he was someone to talk to, and he was my only friend. The kids at school think you're fat and you stink, he would say as I got older. Haven't you ever heard of deodorant? They're all talking about your body odor. Especially the girls, especially Danielle. I liked Danielle. Mr. Giggles would always laugh when he insulted me, to tell me it was just a joke and not to worry about it. Only his laugh didn't sound like he was kidding. Yeah, I guess I should ask my mom to buy me some, I said, embarrassed. Ha, good luck. She doesn't have money for you, only for your sisters. They're the only ones she really cares about. You know that. They're all talking about you behind your back too, you know? And on it would go in the bathroom until someone would knock at the door and kick me out. When my younger brother died, it got even worse. He was just getting old enough for us to become friends when he died of a rare illness after several months in the hospital. Mr. Giggles told me it was my fault, and I believed him. Pretty soon after that, when I was just becoming a teenager, Mr. Giggles started getting meaner. He'd talk in venomous tones about the other kids at school. He'd talk about them for a while, and I'd start to chime in, suddenly feeling better about myself while trash talking the popular kids at school who ignored me. Only then, the sinister clown would quickly flip the conversation into talk about how worthless I was, or how insignificant. I'd tell him he was right, that I was a loser, still no friends at school, walking around on my lunch break with my head down, trying not to be noticed for an hour, eating granola bars and pretending I was going somewhere, moving quickly, too quickly for anyone to notice how alone I was, I hoped. In my 3rd year of high school, I actually made a friend. Then a group of us started walking to the pizza place together every day. Terrible for my cholesterol, but still, I was making some friends, finally. We began hanging out together after school, and I started to forget all about Mr. Giggles. It was like he had just been a figment of my imagination. I finished high school and went to college. When I got there, I was all alone again. I had rented a bedroom in a house near campus, but I was in a city 100 miles away from all my friends and family. My college roommates and classmates were indifferent to me. We didn't talk or socialize, just passed by each other in the halls. It wasn't that I didn't try to talk to people, but it just never went well when I did. I became awkward again, after months of loneliness. By my 2nd year, there it seemed like I was once again destined to have no friends for the foreseeable future. I gave up and spent most of my time in my room while my housemates had parties and played loud music that I didn't particularly like. I would go down and try to socialize occasionally, but could never get anywhere. I don't mean to sound stuck up, but we just had nothing in common. I tried to talk to them, but they had their own stories and history, and I always felt like a third wheel until I ended up going back upstairs to my room. One night, I was doing just that when I heard laughter from the bathroom upstairs. There were half a dozen people in the living room, but no one was in the 2nd floor bathroom. I went over to the bathroom door, more curious than afraid, and heard it again. Hehe, the grunting laugh of a sarcastic clown behind the shower curtain. I had never seen his face and never wanted to. He was terrible. I had forgotten about him and how much I hated him. He wasn't my friend. He only wanted me to feel bad with him, to be in the darkness, in the cold, with him. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I thought you left for good." A ripped and tattered white gloved hand reached out from behind the curtain and pulled it back. His face was covered in dry and cracking white paint, red around the eyes and lips. His mouth was gaping open unnaturally in a large grin, displaying rotten teeth, pointy and plentiful. He was wearing a black and white clown outfit that was torn and decayed. He stayed back in the shadows, and I could barely make out the details of him from where I stood, just a few feet away. The worst part was his eyes. They glowed like mirrors and reflected brightly back at me, mesmerizing me. When I had been a kid, I was never afraid of Mr. Giggles. But now as an adult, I realized this was no figment of my overactive imagination. This creature, whatever he was real. I felt more afraid than ever before in my life as I realized he could reach out and grab me, choke me if he wanted to. But that wasn't what he wanted. "I never left you. I'm a part of you. Say it. Say I'm a part of you." He spoke softly, hypnotically, convincingly. He began to stand up from his crouching position in the bathroom. Suddenly, I noticed he was very tall. His head nearly touched the ceiling in the shower as he loomed over me. His curly crimson tufts of hair stuck up and brushed against the damp, mildewed tiles. I tried to brush away what he said, but couldn't. I started to repeat back what he had told me as I looked up at him standing above me. As scared as I was, his words made sense to me in that moment. I started to repeat his words back to him. "You're Jason, are you up there?" One of my roommates was shouting from the bottom of the staircase. I stuttered for a second, scared and looking at the clown in my shadowy bathtub, staring down at me from the darkness and waiting for me to submit to him. "Yeah, I'm here," I said back, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head at me and held up his finger to his mouth in a silencing gesture, smiling all the while. "Yeah, I'm here," I said again, louder this time. "Come downstairs, man. We're gonna play Twister, and hey," he lowered his voice, "I think Sarah's friend might like you. You know Corinne? She keeps asking where you went. Come on." In the shadows behind the shower curtain, Mr. Giggle stood, waiting. I backed away, scared to turn away from him. When I got to the door, I turned to leave when I heard a voice I hadn't heard in several years. The voice of my deceased younger brother, Carl. I wish I hadn't heard it, but I did. "It's your fault I died, you know," he said. "You got me sick that time at the park when you told me to drink that water from the puddle. You double-dared me, and I did it, and look what happened. Now I live here with him, in the darkness, in the blackness, in the world without light. Join us, brother." His voice sounded different the longer I listened to it, like a slightly sped-up cassette tape. My legs trembled as I walked down the stairs, and I heard his whimpers and sobs turn to high-pitched laughter. Motherfucking Mr. Giggles.